everyone, welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content recorded live in the Invictus Discord as Malevolent is in its 5th season. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a recent update, so if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 236 or part 47, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are archived in the Discord before they're released to the public, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's right calf.
Hello, my name is PinchofPeppers. I go by Peppers, pronouns she, her, and I'm going simple. I control his nose. I think we've already decided, we already said that once, but too bad. I've decided to return to the nose.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'll let you do that.
I'm glad that you are endowing me with this ability.
Okay, do you want to just roll right into giving us our chapter summary?
Yeah. This is part 236. Arthur's cough is getting worse. He's beginning to cough up blood. They know Arthur will have to rely on John, quote, more than ever, end quote. They enter a large common room with the hearth and chairs pulled around it. Inside, they meet fellow guests who've been invited to this city. Barnabas of Belecki, Gerard D. Vendueli, Friar Horberk, and Langward Ardeen. Barnabas seems short-tempered and vocal about his displeasure, impatient over his long stay as he has been there for about a week. Gerard doesn't say much of anything. Sitting at the dining table, Friar Horberk is described as having worn hands but a kind smile. Langward says nothing, but Friar does let us know he's a rather stoic person. Barnabas feels that they've been locked up within this castle and aren't allowed to leave. The only servant within the castle is a witch. She lives below the chambers and does not move or speak, guarding the door below. She cannot see as she wears wrappings around her eyes. Lord Everett hasn't shown for a week, in Barnabas's case. They must wait. In the meantime, we can choose who we should talk to. Choose wisely.
Great summary. I was really impressed because I'm already terrified to have to say any of these names out loud.
Yeah. I literally, for myself, I typed out pronounced Vendely when I was saying Gerard. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a note of that.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay. Well, I liked this chapter. I am glad that we're finally getting back with other human beings that so far don't seem to be cursed or in some way fucked up beyond recognition.
Yeah, I agree.
I definitely was hoping that we would get around people sooner than this, but I'm glad that it took this long. I think that was a good way to get us desperate for human interaction. I think Arthur is probably relieved too, even though he can hear John. I think it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I I really enjoyed this chapter. Very much the same reason you did. We finally get people. Yay. I have honestly ever since season 5 started, my number one thing that I was kind of looking forward to was Arthur interacting with the locals, meaning the locals of this timeline. Now we're kind of finally away from all the monsters for at least a little bit. And he's talking with hopefully normal people. I'm loving the variety of these 4 characters as well.
Yes.
I'm super interested to see how they're going to bounce off of each other and how they're going to bounce off of Arthur. They seem like I I don't remember who I was telling this to. I think it might have been you, Queen, but I really am COVID brained. So when I heard Arthur like coughing up a storm, I think the majority of us who have, gone through the pandemic they hear him coughing, and it's like hearing a bomb. You're like, your head's snapping around. You're like, stop fucking coughing, cover your arm, and you're gonna get us all sick. And that was like my immediate thought. And so because I'm so used to that post pandemic, I was waiting for all the characters to kind of like sneer at him, or like be like, yeah, be basically unsympathetic, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna get me sick. But so far they haven't really acted that way.
Yeah.
Which I was pleasantly surprised by. I did find it incredibly funny when at the beginning John or Arthur like coughs up literal blood, and then John's like, you need to rest, girly pop. I don't think a little nap is gonna help with the coughing up blood bit.
Yeah. Fish says, I still feel like isolation is going to be something to keep in mind as a core theme, but I'm eager to see these new characters, says Fish. And Roses of Envy says, missing all the normal human interactions that we had in season 4. And yeah, in contrast with season 4, you really feel how alone they are and how desolate of a place this is. Vol Control says, Arthur and John have such long stretches of being on their own. We got spoiled in New York. And other people were starting to chime in about your COVID mention. Mizra says Arthur is not practicing social distancing. And Mizra says, petition to get Harlan to say girly pop in John's voice, which, yes, please. By the way, I mean, I will just say, I'm sure you already know this, Peppers, but for those who are listening who don't, Harlan did have COVID, I believe, during lockdown, during the peak of the pandemic, and he actually took that opportunity to go in and record his own COVID coughing. And so what you hear in the audio is actually COVID coughs, and that's how he sounded when he had COVID. So of course he's recovered fine, but I thought it was well, first of all, I think it's very relatable, and also the signature of an artist to take what's happening to them or what's going on around them and make it into content, capital C. I think that a lot of people who create tend to think, oh, this is a good opportunity, I should put this into my work. And I mean that from everybody to writers to artists and, audio drama producers. I mean, clearly there's inspiration in the everyday. And I think it was very smart, albeit kind of insane, to think, oh, I should record these horrific, painful coughs in this potentially life-threatening condition and record them for my podcast just in case in the future. That's another level.
Very resourceful.
Yeah.
I feel the need to mention that the shipping wars have already begun in the chat. We are deciding who is kissing who in this common room. I do believe Graham says, I think Friar Holbrook and Langward should kiss. Who said that? Definitely not Graham, is what I actually mean.
Yeah.
But I think they should all kiss each other.
Yeah, Lambda says, listen, I am a fan of the 4-way polycule. I think that the minute we got the option to have four people in the podcast on top of Arthur and John and Yorick, we all immediately said, they have tangible lips capable of smooching, they have voices, and they're not dying immediately. So how can we get them to kiss? And I loved that very fandom united collective of trying to figure out who would go with who. And we also decided that this vote was also part dating sim, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I feel that everybody really was excited to get this cast of characters. And I want to say, like, they all sound so uniquely different to me. We always talk about how talented Harlan is with his voice, but when he's playing so many characters on screen at the same time, and you can tell them apart during a conversation where all of them are speaking and they're not having these big breaks between dialogue to tell you who is who, and you can still figure out that's a different person. This person's answering the other person. On top of the ability to use that VR panning that he talks about really enjoying in his commentary tracks, which are patron exclusive perks. Join now, please. They're really good. I am a huge fan of the commentaries. I have sections of them memorized because I love them so much. I think that it was a very cool to see how far he's come. If you listen to season 1, I think the first like 5 episodes, 6, maybe a little bit, a few more, don't have that panning quality. And I couldn't tell at first because I'm not really a sound savant, and I didn't realize how immersive that feature is. To be able to actually directionally figure out where sound is coming from is a huge part of this podcast now, and I really like it.
Yeah, I still haven't been able to catch any of the commentaries, so I'm very excited to be spending my weekend listening to that because he dropped a whole bunch, like
Yeah.
the past like 2 days,
A person
which
that
is
he
pretty awesome.
mentioned by name, Megan Lloyd, who
Hmm.
I think people recognize. I'm very out of touch with most of fandom on this side of the internet, so I don't know any of these people. Like Peppers, I saw you getting really excited about somebody named Wolfie who got into Malevolent, and I don't know who that
Yeah.
is, but I'm very excited for all of you. I know that there's a lot going on with lots of big people getting into Malevolent, so very exciting time to be a Malevolent fan right as it starts to end. But
Yeah.
I
Well,
I
let me jump in there to talk at least a little bit about Megan Lloyd and Wolfie. So Megan Lloyd is actually, I would say, so the dynamic for Queen and I is that Queen is in the know within like the members of Malevolent in like the poll chat, and who are like sifting through that kind of content. I am the expert on outside of the Discord, where I know the fan artists like on Tumblr and Twitter. So Megan Lloyd is phenomenal artist. She has actually produced several animated TV shows, including it was a Star Trek TV show, if I remember correctly. So sorry, Megan, I can't remember the exact name of it. But she's been a part of like storyboarding. She's a professional. Like when we say professional, she's like in the industry, professional. And she actually hosts a podcast as well where she and her sister listen to what they force each other to want to watch or listen to. And so they have one. I force my sister to listen to Malevolent.
Oh my God, I saw Harlan retweet about that a while
Yeah.
ago. That's the person who
Yeah.
does that. Okay.
Yeah, so she has a podcast about that, and funny enough, I had no idea, but Joe actually told me that they shouted me out the first 2 podcast episodes because my art got Meg back into it.
Oh
She had
my
listened to it.
God.
Yeah, she listened to it for a little bit, and then there was a certain little angsty part of
Oh, gee, who know? Who
of
knew?
part 43 that she adored, and so she was like, well, I have to go back into this and see what's going on. So that was fantastic. And then for Wolfie, y'all don't know the lore of Wolfie. Wolfie has been a prolific fandom artist for multiple different fandoms such as Dream SMP, Good Omens, the Magnus Archives, Gravity Falls.
So Wolfie's a BNF, a big name fan. Sorry.
Yeah, she's big. I'm sorry, I do not know their pronouns. I don't know why I'm assuming is they're she, but they have drawn just some beautiful art, and I've been crossing my fingers for ages because they keep brushing past Malevolent. They keep falling in the same circles as Malevolent fans, or as Malevolent itself. Their art is phenomenal, and finally they said, I'm gonna watch Malevolent. I lost my mind. I was so excited. They drew some Arthur in their style. I love this Arthur. He has wavy locks. He has a strong nose and chin, and he
That's
has
a really
droopy
lovely
eyes.
Arthur. Yeah.
It is my everything. It's my everything. I'm so happy with it.
Yeah, that's
So
lovely.
shout out to Wolfie. Their art is incredible. But this is to say that seeing all these different fan artists, so much fun. And with Wolfie coming into the fandom, Wolfie also brings in a lot of people who just adore Wolfie's art. And when they see Wolfie drawing Malevolent, They might go, oh, well, what's this little thing? So I'm really hoping to see an influx of new fans come in. And for me personally, I would love to see more fan art. I hope this starts a renaissance of fan art for Malevolent.
Yeah, I that sounds really cool. I'm absolutely fascinated by how many people Malevolent gets around to. I mean, I know it's a podcast. It's a really good podcast, but I don't know. I feel like we've definitely seen this show grow rapidly in the last year. I know that it started out with like 12, 15 people or something like that, and that wasn't that long ago. And when I got here, we were still struggling to break 300 voters. I think I was more in the 250s ish. Now we're definitely getting into that 300 cap. And when I talk about voters, that 300 number, that's just the people who are voting. And there are definitely people at that tier who are not voting. And there are definitely way more people who are at different tiers or at like lower tiers that can't vote. And there are people who listen to Malevolent who, of course, are not part of the Patreon at all. So it's just a very it's grown rapidly over time. I can't imagine how far it's reached by now. So it's bound to hit some big names. But trying to circle back to the chapter here, I think that it's going to be very exciting to see some people get caught up with this section and finally get more of Harlan's voices in spades rather than sort of dropped around like, oh, here's a hag, here's Yorick, here's John, here's Arthur, you know, kind of dotting things around. But now we have like a room full of people and it feels so alive to me, like being in that room. I don't know. I'm very excited to see what else we can get out of these people. But that being said, I just have a lot of weird feelings about each of these men. I don't know. They all seem like murder suspects. Like I don't know how else to say it, but this chapter gives off huge murder mystery vibes.
Yeah, I'd agree. That was not my immediate thought when I listened to them, just because I was so excited to hear new people. I was
Yeah,
like,
of
oh
course.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Who's your favorite, would you say?
Oh God, my personal favorite. I mean, unfortunately, I I have a hard time picking a favorite based on how little dialogue we have, but from what we've gotten, probably Barnabas is my favorite.
Yes, me too. I think Barnabas is my little girly pop. I would die for Barnabas. He is Tormund from Game of Thrones to me.
I don't know. Usually I really don't like it when people are super chatty right up the top and give out everything and play all their cards, but man, I feel like I feel like Barnabas is a fun time, even if not the best time. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how he behaves going forward, regardless of whether or not he's the vote.
I just love how we got another mean Scott. And I love that for us. He's such a mean little guy and I love him. We need to win over his affections like immediately. It
That's
is
the
a
problem. He's a
desperation for
mean
me.
little guy, and unfortunately, the meaner people are to me, the more I want to hang out with them. And like, I
Yes,
don't know what's wrong
exactly.
with
We
me.
have to win over his affections and if we do, friends for life. Friend for life, maybe even a little smooch here and there. We could get it. We could get it, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I think that they're all very interesting. I am especially drawn toward people who refuse to talk at all, which means it's time for me to make a new friend in Langward as well. I really like it when the narrative's like this character is refusing to speak to you and is closed off and turned away from the group, and then the protagonist is like, but I'm gonna fix him. I'm gonna make him talk in a way that other people can't. I love that dynamic too. I also love I love a croissant. I love a Frenchman. So I mean there's good things about everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, regarding the other characters, I am very interested. Friar Holbrook, I don't necessarily feel like positive or negative about him. I think he's a more friendly guy. And I think that comes with the nature of his profession of being a friar. I don't necessarily am sensing any bad vibes from him like some other people are who think that he's like a secret murderer.
I mean, okay, look, I just think now here's the problem. Friar Holbrook reminds me of that one guy who I can never remember the name of that we met back last season. I don't know. Something like Oswald on
Oswald Cobblepot,
yeah,
whatever.
some kind of guy who was
Percy?
a religious dude. No, not Percy. Some guy with, I don't know, a weird name. Anyway, something like it reminded me of him so much that I was like, okay, first of all, I didn't like that first guy to begin with. I thought he was real suspicious. I did not trust him within an inch of my life. I still don't trust him. I know he turned out to be good and whatever, but I just don't, I don't know. I get a bad feeling. Okay. But now that Holbrook is here, I just feel like anyone that friendly in this situation, that's my job. Like I don't trust anyone else to be that friendly. I don't necessarily think that he has the best of intentions. I think he might be either he's going to be unbelievably stupid and get caught in some kind of awful trap because he was too trusting or too naive, or which was just going to be lead us to trouble, right? Or he's going to turn out to be some kind of I was befriending you to make sure that you were a good sacrifice to my giant spider wife or something like that. Like it's going to be some
And
crazy.
you know what, Slay? And you know what? Good for him. Good for him. And if he said that, I'd be like, you know what? I can't fault you for that. We all want a Dobby, a Dobby Spider Mommy. Okay, I get it.
Peppers. Yeah, I feel like the Harbrook is just a little bit too much for, especially for the genre. But everybody else seems normal. Like not exceedingly normal. Like I'm still suspicious of everybody. If anything, Malevolent has taught me not to trust anybody ever, never, ever. But I do think that Horbrook is a difficult choice because way too friendly, too suspicious, don't like that. Langward is really, really closed off, and as much as that allures me, and I have had wild success opening up those little baby clamshells who don't want anything to do with people, I understand that's probably not Arthur's game, so I respect like the fact that probably Arthur wouldn't approach him first. I also think that Gerard presents a unique allure to me specifically because he's like the midsection between Horbrook and Langward, where he's not giving us too much, he's not putting on airs, but he's polite, he's quiet, he's reading a book, which means he's literate, which is a big deal. And I think I'd prefer to talk to somebody.
But you know what? Barnabas also said he can read because he said
Okay,
all those
listen,
books could keep him company.
that's the other thing. We have no idea how many of these men could be lying, right? Like we straight up have no proof that Barnabas can actually read, and there's a point where you could say
Okay, if you use that logic, then I'm gonna say that Gerard just has the book in front of him, but he cannot in fact read, and he's just using it to put on air.
You know what? That's fair. That's absolutely fair. But
they're like, this guy is coming. The prince is coming. Quick, I'm gonna run over here and I'm gonna sit really mysteriously at this hearth and I'm gonna read this book. But you can't read. No, don't tell him that.
Well, listen, I was just trying to point out that Gerard offers his unique perspective as kind of a middle ground between everybody, where he really hasn't said too much, but he seems friendly and approachable and kind of like he's reading and focused, but he nods when he's addressed and he doesn't seem like super closed off like Langward. So I feel like he's a really good middle ground between all of the warring personalities and dynamics here. And I would prefer, well, we'll talk about that when we get to the vote, which I think we're about to get to right now. Because it's really hard to talk about this chapter without talking about the vote. They kind of go hand in hand. I will just say this chapter very much set up for me the vibes of a murder mystery dinner, like movies like Murder on the Orient Express or Glass Onion or Knives Out, where it's very classic. All of these people get invited to one central location. They usually don't know the person who invited them. They don't know each other, or they're very blurry on what the connections are. There's some kind of sign that they're supposed to be here, like food and unlocked chambers, so they know that they have not been invited on accident or don't have the wrong location. And they're all kind of waiting to see where the host is. And then once everybody's gathered, then something happens to additionally both put time pressure on and keep the host kind of a mystery. So if the host doesn't appear, that means that they're going to have a proxy of some kind, an avatar, a servant of some kind that is going to act as the host, in lieu of actually seeing the host, or the host will appear and give the grand dialogue of the mystery and set up what's going to happen. But I do think that Arthur's increasing difficulty speaking and his illness and all of that is starting to signal that time pressure of we don't have very long until Arthur is unable to continue to help us in this way, or he's going to start to fuck up more, which I think it's more likely that Arthur is going to mess up rather than just not be able to talk or not be able to relay what John's saying. I think it's going to be more complicated than just, oh, Arthur can't talk because he's coughing so much. I think that we have all the elements here of a really good murder mystery dinner. I think that like Clue, I know somebody just posted, Benjamin Frogcrow just posted a great gif in the Discord. I think that we are very we're very much prepped to get a murder mystery. I would not put it past Harlan to say, "Ha, you thought," and not do that, but I would be so excited if we got a classic murder mystery dinner out of this. I don't know if that's in the cards because we're trying to be serious and late game about things, but it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mizra says, "I just hope the murder mystery dinner includes actual dinner. Please let Arthur eat something."
And what's so funny is I immediately hear murder mystery dinner and I'm like, that sounds so good right now.
Yeah, I want dinner so bad. I'm so hungry. Okay, let's talk about the vote. But first, we have a voice message from a guest. So if you guys don't know, I'm just going to let you know right now in the Discord. So this is only available to patrons. Sorry, public listeners, you should join the Patreon. You can join at any tier and hear Autopsy live. It's not locked to a specific group, so you can pay. I think the lowest tier for Invictus is $3, $3 a month, and you can come hang out with us. We have a voice message bank where you can record your own voice, up to 90 seconds, and submit it. You could say whatever you want within limits. There's more information on the form, and we will play it on the show. This is going to be our first instance of doing so, but I am very excited because I think this is a great tool to make sure that other people are able to get their voices heard. So I'm going to mute. Peppers, I suggest you mute as well.
Ugh, fine.
I know it hurts.
Hello, my name is Graham. Probably heard of me before on this podcast. I use he, him pronouns, and I am just here to say that you should vote Barnabas because he's been here. You know, I'm not gonna go with the typical argument. So he's been here for a while. Oh, you know, he knows things. He's seen suspicious things. He's he's chatty. He'd be easy to get to talk. That's too easy. That's too simple. You should vote Barnabas because it would be really funny and it would make Queen very mad. And a lot of the Malevolent Autopsy is making Queen mad. So in the spirit of Malevolent Autopsy, you should vote Barnabas. This is so stupid. He's very funny. He's a very funny guy. He's very relatable. He's a man of the people. So, you know, I've definitely not been bribed into voting for him. He was definitely my original vote, 100%. Trust me, bro. Yeah.
Graham, thank you for your wonderful voice message that completely disagrees with me and points out that half the reason this show is funny is because I get really mad. But I mean, I don't know. Barnabas seems like the obvious option. I don't know. Like, it feels too easy. Barnabas is going to talk regardless of whether or not we engage with him, which is something I think I've mentioned before. And I just don't feel like voting for him is the right move. But let me briefly, for those who are not able to vote or don't know what the poll choices are, this is 236 of poll. It's between who are we going to talk to? So it's Friar Horbrook, Gerard, Barnabas, or Langward. And right now, this is actually a Sunday night that we were recording. Is it Saturday or Sunday? It's Sunday, right? Yeah. Okay.
It's Sunday. Oh, I wish it was Saturday, but it's, yeah.
And Friar Holbrook is at 13%, so is Gerard. Barnabas is at 40 in the lead, and Langward is 34 with 281 votes. And we usually hit about 300 and change when we are done on Monday morning with everything. Yeah, I don't know. Gerard, my poor boy, is in last place with Friar Horbrook, who I don't trust that man as far as I can throw him, and I probably can't throw him far.
Unfortunately, I'm a very trusting person.
No, you're not.
I actually, like, I'm like, hell yeah, Friar is, like, there's nothing wrong with him.
Oh my god.
He's chill, yeah.
You really think so?
Yeah, I do.
What?
Which is why I would probably be one of the first to die in a horror movie, because I'd be like, yeah, his intentions are pure. Maybe it's the religious trauma in me talking, where I'm like, oh, he would do nothing wrong.
Well, okay.
He's a friar.
Did you trust that one guy who I can't remember the name of, the Oswald guy or whoever from the last season?
Oswald.
Like Oz something. You know who I'm talking about, the guy who lost his arm.
Oh, yeah, Oswald. You were going to play that little card. Oscar? Yeah, I did. I don't know, because I wasn't in poll chat during that time. My very first poll that I did, don't worry, Graham, we'll get to your thing. But the first time I did my poll was when we were picking who to forget, like a memory to forget, and I was like, you guys are crazy for saying that we need to forget Faro. That'd be like wild.
Yeah, that's funny.
Or at least a memory of Faro.
It's really funny that you are so not about poll chat and I am so into poll chat, and we had the same first poll. Like,
that's so funny.
Yeah, it just shows you what a different experience you can have depending on what you choose to engage in and how you choose to engage in it. I think it's really cool. It's like the two different experiences of the fandom, and I think it's really neat to get all of the perspectives, especially when we have so many people who contribute so much and so many different perspectives. We have like Yami in the chat saying definitely feels too easy, and Fish saying Arthur needs something easy right now. So, okay, I guess why I asked if you thought that guy was trustworthy or not, or what you thought of him, is because before I was a patron and I was listening to Malevolent, I actually was super distrustful of Oscar. Right, Oscar.
I can't tell if this is a bit or not.
It is a bit. I will okay, I will explain for people who don't know, because they're not in the Discord, but I have never liked Oscar. I don't know why. I just really didn't like him when we first met him. It wasn't like a like, it wasn't, at first it really wasn't that bad, but then I think it was the moment when they're in the car with him and he's like super excited to get his hands on that book, and he acts like he's really interested in it. And I know there's a good reason, and like artifacts and religious significance and all that shit, but I really was suspicious of him the second he seemed so excited to see the book. If you go back and listen to that section, that moment for me was like, this dude, something's wrong with this guy. He's a cultist. He's gonna kill Arthur. Like, I was so in it about how Oscar was suspicious as fuck from the minute he showed interest. And then he goes down into the basement with Arthur and he's poking around without him in the dark. And I'm sitting there like, okay, either he's stupid and he's a cultist and he's just like trying to get into shit, or he's sabotaging Arthur. And then of course Oscar turned out to be like ooh-woo baby who did nothing wrong and got his arm chopped off, and it's all Arthur's fault or whatever. And now, like, he's gone and we've ditched him. So, like, I guess he's done and, like, we don't have to deal with him anymore. But, like, I don't know. I just never liked him. And then on top of that, there was this whole thing of him writing this letter to Arthur and how everybody wanted to read the letter from Oscar. And I was like, I just still feel so suspicious of him, and even though the show has proven to me there's really no reason for me to think that, he's gone, his arc is over. But the reason I specifically say who is because, number one, I didn't really get invested in Oscar's story. And that's not to say that it's Harlan's fault. It's just that some stories don't resonate with people. And for me, our Oscar's didn't. I found it really hard to follow personally, and I just didn't feel really strongly about what he did or what he went through. So I wasn't very attached to him. And then on top of that, I just didn't really feel, I felt like Arthur ditching him was kind of permission to not care about him anymore. And so when people remind me that he exists, I genuinely sometimes forget like the whole Oscar arc happened. For me, the most significant parts of that arc were actually just John learning that he needs to share his buddy and Arthur having that conversation with him. And I guess that was, I mean, for me, that was a lot of what I took away from that section, John and Arthur's growth, rather than anything that had to do with Oscar. So for me, Oscar was a story device and a vehicle, and I don't really connect with him. So when I say who, I'm trying to emphasize not only did we pick him to forget about, and that's got to come up at some point, but also I want to remind everybody that felt like a very disposable character at a very disposable moment that we are meant to like leave behind, and it will come back around later. I am positive. I don't think it's intentionally being like burned. I just think it's in the past. And so when I say who, I'm making a joke because I don't care about Oscar, but also because we chose him to throw in the memory trash can, and apparently we have yet to see the consequence of that action. I don't know what that's going to come to. That's the long story of why I say who when people talk about Oscar, and I don't seem to remember his name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting. I personally don't share. I mean, I'm not necessarily hung over Oscar. I'm not necessarily like, oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite characters. But I enjoy him. I found a lot of fun with his character. I did really enjoy his little arc. I found it to also be like a very compassionate take on, you know, a priest who's lost and who has all of these like vices in his life and all these issues going in with him, and taking this more like compassionate viewpoint so that it's also translated in Malevolent, that the creator doesn't hate religious people and that this is more just you know, a very healthy talks about the issues in religion, but also showing kind of the goodness and self-sacrifice that you see in,
Yeah,
I would say, good men of faith. So I found a lot of love and value and comfort in Oscar. I'm not necessarily, you know, falling over my feet when we're going to read this letter. I'm excited to read this letter whenever he has. Don't worry, we will talk about the vote.
this is becoming relevant because I was going to bring it back around.
Yeah, this is becoming relevant because we're then relating this to Friar, where I'm definitely coming at this to the point of, well, Oscar was a pretty like mellow guy, pretty self-sacrificing. Who's to say that the Friar, you know, will not be the same? But also at the same time, maybe he is secretly actually a cultist. I do know that they mentioned like a lesser building of God or something like that.
So he jokes about the fact that the equivalent of like the medieval 15th century washroom, toilet, bathroom is the lesser house of God,
Yeah.
since you always end up praying there. That's the joke.
That didn't.
And that was Barnabas. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm moving my vote to Barnabas.
Oh
That's
my God.
hilarious.
Oh, damn it. Okay. Well, like circling back around to why I brought up Oscar and all that. That is the reason that Friar Holbrook does not resonate with me. I don't like that he's friendly. I just don't. I guess in Malevolent specifically, because this is not how I usually approach a lot of my media. Malevolent is unique in how it has made me approach its story. I have not ever reacted this way consistently in any other storytelling choose your own adventure type thing. But Malevolent, this guy is too friendly. I don't like it. I don't trust anybody anymore, especially after I saw like how how hard it hit us that like we got bit by the prince, the zombie prince, because like specifically because we just sat there like, I don't know, maybe he could show us the way out. Maybe he could show it how give us directions. Maybe he'll be an ally someday. Maybe he's innocent and he's just gonna wander around and groan and ask for brains and be cool. Like I we were told not to trust anybody. We were told to watch our backs and be super suspicious. That's really what I took out of the first couple of parts. Like for me, that has been driven home so hard that I just do not like it when somebody approaches me like, hey, I'm this guy, let me walk up and introduce myself and shake your hand and be like super forward about everything. I don't like it. I don't like it. If we were in New York, I could maybe say that it would be possibly okay, but I didn't even like Oscar, and he honestly was not that nice to us when we first met him. We really had to bully him into being nice to us. So it has I don't know that it has anything to do with how nice somebody is, that I may not care for them, but man, I don't appreciate a nice guy in a murder mystery castle. Either he's dying first or he's gonna backstab us. That's my vote for what's gonna fucking happen with the friar. As far as Barnabas, I swear to God, did you actually choose? Are you actually gonna switch your vote because he made a joke?
No.
Thank
I
fucking
still
God.
haven't moved my vote. I haven't even bothered to open up Patreon.
Oh my God, how? How? I want to live in your little brain.
No. What I mean is, I haven't moved from Friar. Did I
Okay,
say
okay, okay.
Barnabas? I haven't moved from Friar. I haven't voted for. I mean, it's not going to do anything, so I don't really care. I don't know. I just stuck on that idea. I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just stick with Friar, even though it's losing. I think ultimately, I still enjoy Barnabas. I find him very interesting as a character. I understand people who do pick Barnabas, however, because in the same way that, yeah, he is a yapper, there is no guarantee that the other characters around us will be willing to share. And at the very least, we do know that Barnabas is willing to talk. So I can understand people who make that vote towards Barnabas. And also just that he, out of all of the characters, he has the most out there personality, which makes him really interesting to interact with. However, at the same time, we do have very interesting, more subdued characters, such as Gerard and the other guy that I literally don't even remember anymore. And I'm sorry, I only remember Friar and Barnabas. I remember
Miss Peppers
Gerard
has
and
space for two men in her brain at all times.
listen. My thought currently is still zeroed in on Barnabas. Langward, that's his name. Okay.
Yeah, the names are literally on screen, by the way, Peppers.
Oh. Do you know what? I did not look at the screen. I scrolled up to one of the
my
polls.
fucking God.
So.
I love you. You're great.
Hey. I would like to argue that I took my matcha much earlier this morning.
You
so
took your matcha like a fucking
I
pill.
took my matcha like a pill, yeah. Just like
A
that
capsule
old
of
za.
matcha powder.
Yeah, I took that za this morning, so
Oh God. Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's. I'm gonna read out some of the comments because people are going nuts. So basically, everyone yelled at me because I was hating on Oscar. I'm an Oscar hater. People were yelling Queen over and over again. Queen gave up her memory of Oscar canon, said Fall Control, which I really liked. Sierra of Time says, I am simply really fascinated by Gerard because of how much we don't know about him, which is me, same, why I'm voting him. And then Penth rights activist, aka Gami, says, my first poll was whether or not we should give the talisman location to the witch. That poll chat was stressful as fuck. Yes, it was. Everything related to the witch was stressful as fuck. I think we can all agree on that. Except for Peppers, who, like, wasn't in the poll chat, which sounds like a blessing. Well,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I take that back, because I think I really like the stress.
I despise the stress.
Yeah,
Oh,
I get you.
can't do it.
I get you. And then people are sharing their first votes and all of that. Roses of Envy said, Oscar has almost killed a man and he stole my heart from that moment. Yeah, that's fair. I like men who kill men.
Well, and it was also the fact that he was killing. He wasn't a predator. He was
An
just like
abuser. He was like a shitty person.
Yeah. So he was like. I'm just saying he's a male wife. Strong male wife energy. from Oscar.
Gami says, I thought he was incredibly untrustworthy until he, like, lost an arm for Arthur. At which point, like, yeah, we had to ditch him. Like, can you imagine having carried around Oscar for the rest of the season who has, like, one arm and is probably in constant pain? It would suck. I mean, no offense, but, like, Arthur's already dealing with a lot to hamper him right now, and if they had pulled Oscar through the whole rest of the season, it would have been miserable for Oscar, for Arthur, for John, for everybody. Would not have been a good time. We would have had to help Oscar as well as Arthur, and I don't think we're capable of handling that. I'm gonna scroll past a bunch of Oscar stuff. I also will say that people are talking about the fact that we like gave up Oscar memory stuff and we have not suffered any consequences. Then Graham pointed out, "Hey Queen, you know who was that friendly? You know who? Charlie Dowd, Detective Knoll. Mizra, you can go ahead and play Bittersweet City underneath the following section of audio." I have to tell you right now, I know that this is not anything to do with the current vote, but this is my podcast and I do what I want, and this is gonna always be a Charlie Dowd podcast. I think we should start adopting the idea of what would Charlie do? I think Charlie is in every way like what Arthur could have been if he had a normaler life after the Dreamlands. I think it was like it would be a great way to carry through his memory because he's out there chilling in Spain having like a drink or something. I'm sure he's fine. Everything's fine. He's not dead or injured or in any agony. He's probably just waiting for Arthur to get back home. That's what I think is happening. And I think that it would be a really good idea, especially during like this murder mystery arc of going into this castle and everything, that we think, okay, in a situation where we have a tough choice, what would Charlie pick? Like, who would he pick? And I do believe that he would pick Gerard, because Gerard is the nice, happy medium. He's not super forward like Barnabas, or like super friendly like Holbrook, which you would already be able to assume that like that's easy pickings. We don't need to go out of our way and choose an easy target. I think doesn't need to be worn down. Same with Barnabas, I would argue. Langward is way too closed off, and you gotta wait to crack that egg. But Gerard is like the perfect middle ground. He's reading a book, which shows he's literate, which is specific and special in this time period, I will point out. And I think Charlie would pick Gerard, and that is another good reason to vote for him. This is my Charlie Dowd platform. The end.
And you know what? I do have a counter to that. Because as a detective, you usually go for the people who are the most willing to chat. The fact that Barnabas has also shared that he has read many books, not just one, but many books in his study, his new little huge room that he's in. But he's willing to talk, he's willing to crack jokes, he's willing to just chat up. And I think a number one thing that a detective would do is go to somebody who's the most willing to talk. Yeah.
I honestly think you have a good point. I also think that it would be really funny if Charlie and Barnabas could interact. I think that they would have a lot of fun together. I also think that Liz actually made a really good point in poll chat the other day, which is that Barnabas seems to be the kind of player character that Harlan most often gravitates toward, which I didn't know because I don't really watch any of the other stuff. And I have really been thinking about that, because if that's true, and I do feel like that's true, not only because Liz knows what she's talking about, but also because I can just see Harlan enjoying playing a character like Barnabas long term for a game that he's a player in, rather than like as a DM, as an NPC, the way Barnabas is right now. I can kind of see where he would enjoy doing that, and that would be the kind of character that he would get a lot of joy out of playing. And if I were a GM, I would be hoping my players would pick like the character that I am most excited about playing. So I do actually think I'm gonna vote for Barnabas.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
real time? Dude, this is crazy.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that.
Woo! Good job, everybody. I made an impact on a vote, and this will
wait,
never
Liz is in the
happen again.
chat. Wait, is Liz listening right now?
Yeah.
Liz, oh hi, welcome. Oh my god, hi Liz. We don't usually get Liz in the chat because Liz has a night job, and we record when Liz is working, I think. Welcome, Liz. You're the best, and I love you, and we're best friends, and I never, ever, ever don't like hearing from you. Liz did say earlier in the chat, I'm just now saying, every character in the show is bait for dying. It's a Call of Cthulhu campaign in a certain way. And while Oscar had the bad luck of getting maimed for our bad choice. It's not as if Noel couldn't have gone the same way if we left him behind with the horde of elder things, for example. And Oscar did have an important impact on Arthur. He saved Daniel twice and genuinely tried to help at every turn, which I think is an important point to make in a story that is ultimately a hopeful one, that not everyone is an enemy out to get us. Noel also played that role, but I'm sure there were multiple choices where he would have trusted us less or helped us less. Yes, I agree with all of that, Liz. I do think, like, as much as I didn't latch on to Oscar, I will just say, like, I don't think he served no purpose in the narrative. I do think clearly Arthur values him because he was part of a memory that, like, we had to pick from, which just points out to you how significant he was. So I do think that's a big deal. Yeah, wow. I did not expect to flip, but I did. And I think that was earned. Also, like, I'm not gonna lie, you give me a reason to talk about Charlie and I'll probably flip. If you give me a reason why Charlie would want me to vote the way you're voting, that's probably the key to doing it at this point. I have been pilled.
See, I now
Yeah.
know the secret. The secret.
Look, if I
to
can throw a
unlock for
Tamagotchi
Queen.
into the vote, I will do it, and Peppers will probably do it. Yeah.
You know what? And you're so right for that. If you were to say, you know
This
what,
is how it can get us to
Langward,
Tamagotchi.
yeah, if you were to be like Langward actually secretly has a Tamagotchi in his little jacket, I'd be like, guys, we know what we have to do.
Fish is really seems really angry, and I don't know why. Fish, why are you angry? I voted the way you wanted me to vote. He keeps yelling about the fact that we have no proof it's a murder mystery. And, like, no, we don't, but except that it's following all of the roadmaps to a murder mystery. Every single path, there are specific beats you have to, okay, so when you're writing a novel, like a murder mystery, or really any mystery, it doesn't have to be murder mystery. When you're writing a mystery, there are specific beats, just like the hero's journey, where there are actual steps that are named in literature that you have to follow to like plot out this course, right? And no, you don't always have to have all of them, and there's lots of creativity, but the general path of, like, story opens, there's a conflict, it gets resolved, like, that concept, that's every story. You can't get away from that. And so in the same vein, like, we really are hitting every beat for this to be kind of one of those murder mystery dinner parties where we are all trying to figure out who's killing people as they die. It's a very scary movie, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't think it hurts to think about it like that. I think it's fun. I'm not saying that that's what I'm hinging my vote on. I would just be really excited if it happened because it's one of my favorite things. You've switched your vote live too.
I did.
Yay.
I changed it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Wow, look, we've agreed.
I know. This doesn't usually happen, I feel like. Unless it does, and I straight up am just not remembering.
No, I mean, we've agreed before, but not to the extent that where we both change our vote to a vote we weren't making in the first place.
Yeah. Not only do we rarely have a four-way vote, but also we don't usually, not only are we separate on that vote, but then we come together at the end of a podcast to do it. I did see people really, really want Fryer and Langward to kiss. So, I mean,
the important things.
Well, I mean, that was the one thing that I was focusing on, and I did.
Look, that's fine. I think no one would blame you. Gami replied to Liz's post, and I want to read that out loud because that whole thing was a really great dialogue. I wish Liz was in the chat more because she gives really good comments. So Agami says, I think there's also a distinction between characters that are bait for death and characters that are bait for certain types of people when voting. And I think Barnabas and Langward and the Friar are all bait for very specific types of people. Want to make friends, want to prod the quiet guy, want to talk to someone that'll talk back. And Gerard being the most neutral is the most interesting to me. Yeah, really, Gami, that's where I was coming from. Whereas, you know, Gerard being the least not the least attractive, not the most attractive, not the most talkative, but not super closed off. Like, the fact that he was kind of a neutral middle option did make me feel interested in him. And I don't think he was the worst option. Frankly, I think Langward was probably going to quote unquote, punish us the most. I don't ever think there's, like, a wrong option when you're picking what NPC to speak to, but I do think Langward would have given us the least. So if you think that's a punishment, I would say that that's the most punishing thing you could vote right now. But I do think that probably Barnabas is going to talk the most. And again, I don't know that I want that, but I do think that if that is a character that the GM is going to have a lot of fun playing, it's probably more likely that we're going to get a lot more from him. And thinking in that kind of meta perspective helps. Again, I also just straight up am starting to vote what would Charlie do. And I do think you had a really good point in saying that a detective would probably talk first to the person that is the most talkative and get everything they can out of that person before moving on, because you do try to hit easy goalposts first so that you are, when you're talking to the harder eggs to crack like Langward, you have something to go off of. So yeah, in real time I have decided that I was indeed wrong, and yes, I can sometimes be wrong. I know.
Wow.
I know.
This is great. Somebody record this.
Okay, before we go, I did pose a couple of questions to the chat because I want to start kind of involving the chat a little bit more in some interesting questions that maybe we're going to be excited to look back on as this part progresses and see if we were right or not, or like see how things shook out. So one of the questions I asked ahead of time was, who do you think is the least trustworthy in this room? And Peppers, who do you think is the least trustworthy?
Apparently everyone says Friar. Me, probably Langward. I just don't like his name.
I just don't like his name. I was calling him Squidward in
I
chat.
just don't like his vibes.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I get it.
like
I get
vibes.
that. I think Fryer is the least trustworthy just because I think if he's not going to die first, he's gonna kill us. I think I don't buy that he's not. There's not that something wrong with him. Somebody, I asked people to vote, and it sounds, yeah, like you said, everybody's kind of in agreement that the Fryer is the least trustworthy. And funny enough, Barnabas, of course, did not rack up more than one person who said he was the least trustworthy. I'm going to read some comments here. Roses of Envy said, I'm going on vibes and vibes alone, and with how dismissive Herberg was of Barnabas's concerns about the castle makes me suspicious. He seems like the type who would insist there's a reasonable explanation for everything until there's no other choice to confront it, which is also very first one to die in a horror movie vibes. There's always a skeptic. Graham says, I swear this isn't just my anti-Gerard agenda. I feel like Gerard is the most untrustworthy because we just know the least about his MO. The others all seem to have very distinct personalities so far. Langward is standoffish, the Friar is friendly, Barnabas is boisterous. We just don't have a lot to work with for Gerard. But I don't actually feel like any of the new characters are particularly untrustworthy, so this is more like a if I had to pick type deal. I did almost vote Langward, but considering how he's openly avoiding interaction, that doesn't really feel untrustworthy to me. Like, he's not inviting anybody to trust him. I don't know, just my thoughts.
He's just an introvert.
Yeah, he's just an introvert. Vol Control says, I think Holbrook is the least trustworthy because I don't trust the clergy. But for real, I think he's most likely to have the most biased perspective. Not untrustworthy as in likely to betray, but untrustworthy because of his judgment. I also think he's going to be the first to die because he shook Arthur's hand. It's a very good point. I do agree that is concerning.
Bubonic plague. I'm so excited for the bubonic plague arc. It's gonna be great.
Okay, the next question I asked was, who do you think is most likely to die first in this room? And it looks like everybody in chat is in agreement that Friar Holbrook is going to die first.
I actually think Barnabas is gonna die first.
You think so?
I think he's too opinionated. I think his loud mouth is gonna get him in trouble. And, I don't know, it's just a vibe that I have.
I think it depends on I think who dies first is going to depend on how we react to all of these characters as time goes on. And that's not a choice in my poll here, so I have to pick one. If I had to pick one, probably I'd say the Friar again, because I just feel like if he's not going to die, he's going to backstab us. But I do think that when you're talking about what things are going to turn out like, I think it's going to depend on how the patrons react to, for example, if we're going to start talking to Barnabas a bunch, somehow if we get onto like certain topics, or if the patrons start wanting to talk to Langward again even more, and the more choices we have in the way Arthur responds to things, John, I think it's going to shape who is going to be on the chopping block first, because none of us are under the impression that any of them are going to I don't think almost any of these people are going to survive the season. I just feel like that's not the genre we're in. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't want to say I think everyone's gonna die, because I feel like that sets us up for everyone to die. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to put the vibes out there and make the prophecy come true because I believed in it, but it just doesn't feel like we're destined to have friends or people who live.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting if someone were to survive. It's kind of up in the air as to who will survive. I've always found that the funny one, the loudmouth one, the whatever one, there's usually one of two options. Either they're the first to die, or they're the second to last to die.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't like watch horror movies. The only like horror content I consume is horror podcasts. I mean, the closest like loudmouth, opinionated, yet kind of funny person I have to relate him to is Tim Stoker. And those are two very different personalities, very different characters. And he, I guess you could say, was the second to last to die. And so I'm kind of expecting a similar fate to Barnabas. I don't want to say that Malevolent is like falling under this tropey expectation. I am just trying to put I don't know. I'm just trying to guess and see who might die first. And I just feel like in most cases, people who are loudmouths and may offend people of higher power, they're probably gonna get killed.
Well, I think the other thing too is that, for example, you could argue any of these people would be first to die based on what's going to happen next. Like, I can totally see Fire Holbrook being a first to die because he's just really nice, and it would be really sad when this really sweet person dies, right? You could argue that Gerard is going to die because he's the least consequential, so it would be a very light blow, but it would warn us that, like, hey, this is a possibility, and it's a good warning shot because no one's going to really care about Gerard yet. He hasn't said very much, but at the same time, we don't hate him. It's sad that he died, we're not going to not care. But you could argue that Barnabas could be first to die because he's just got a lot too much to say. Some people are going to love him. People are already falling in love with him. He's
my guy.
Yeah, he's going to be very, I think people are going to get very, people who love Barnabas are going to like really get attached to him. And if he dies, that's going to be very hard. So I think you could argue, yeah, the loudest person is going to die. Or you could argue Langward is going to die to kind of increase the mystery and suspicion of what we will never know now that this person who didn't open up is dead, and what secrets and, was he hiding that we'll never figure out, and things like that. So really, there's a really good chance that any of these four could be up first. I think there's a different perspective for everything, and it really does just depend on how the audience is going to respond to these characters. Because really, when it comes down to it, like, yes, it's the story and the narrative, and I know Harlan has certain plans laid out, but I do know that this is still an interactive show, and that goes both ways. So the more you love something out loud, Harlan is going to see that. This is a game we're playing with him, and he does respond to things that we think and feel. You can see that in the commentaries when he's going back over season 1 right now, and he's talking about why he made certain decisions and how things went and what the voters thought. And albeit it was a much smaller audience to start with, but it's starting to get to where he's commenting on things where he was in the hundreds of patrons again, and we're starting to learn more about that process. And you can tell that he really does see how his fans feel about the characters that he creates and how the story's going so far, and that is part of how he constructs it. Whereas if you were just writing a book or producing a pre-written audio drama, you wouldn't really be able to adjust who's going to die first based on how fans are feeling. You know what I mean? Like, if at the end of the story none of them are going to survive, you just got to pick an order for them to die in that serves your story, and you want it to be emotionally impactful. So depending on your audience, you can change, you can pivot who's going to die first and what the circumstances are going to be, as long as you hit your important plot beats. So I'm very excited to see how Harlan steers things. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you want your Blorbo to survive, don't talk about your Blorbo.
Well, that's absolutely impossible for me. I'm a yapper, and I think the majority of people in this audience are also yappers. I just think that if your favorite does die, you should get really mad and go on Tumblr and just decide to make these like character slated opinions about the creator, and how you really just don't like his vibe anymore because it reflects on him morally. I think you
Peppers,
should do that.
I think Harlan is gonna send you a fucking invoice. I um I also I want to mention, like, Fish did say, why round up these men in particular if you are a cultist, if you just want to murder them for a non-cult reason. I think they're here for capital R reasons. I As to why these men might be here, I really don't. That's not even something that I care about right now. I actually don't care about why they're here. I know that's going to be revealed in time, and even if the exact reason is not clear, I think it's like I think it could either be all one individual reason, or they could all be rounded up for the same, like they're all connected in some way. Maybe the same event happened, and we really don't know. I think anything's possible at this point. Whether or not you think a cult is involved, I think it's pretty obvious that there's some cult activity, but that may or may not be why they were invited. It could be something that is a secondary, like almost, I don't want to say a B plot, because the cults are obviously a really big deal, but I'm trying to say, like, I don't think that necessarily it needs to be all about, like, they were summoned here because they're cult sacrifices. I don't think it's that simple. I think if it has to be done in a certain way, maybe, but I think it would be way more obvious by now if it was just as simple as, oh, they just need blood sacrifice. Like, I think that's a little too clean and cut for me as far as why they're here. Fish says they're here for a bar mitzvah.
The question I have as well, was it explained whether or not these people were also of higher social status? Like, obviously Arthur is posing as a prince.
Yeah.
But they didn't, like, they said that these people were covered in comfortable clothes. Well, I don't really know, like, is it still lavish? Is it still elaborate? Obviously these people have to be at least a little high up in status if they're going to talk so in such a relaxed manner to a prince. So I'd like to imagine that they're also a collection of lords and
I gotta say though, like, Peppers, I feel like sometimes I try to use the same logic too, where, like, well, they're talking so casually to a prince, like, obviously that means something. And then I'll hear Harlan later be like, I didn't really think about that because it's not really important. Like, and I'm like sitting there going, oh, well, now I've factored in knowledge that didn't really matter because it wasn't really important. So it's really hard to tell what's going to be contextually important and what's not. And that has something to do with a thing that he mentions. I keep referring to the commentaries. I know you haven't listened to them, but I guess
it's okay. I'm currently in, like, I'm starting to listen to the commentaries.
Okay.
So
well,
if you want to spoil something, it's the commentaries. It's not like I'm
Yeah.
gonna be like, what the fuck? I can't believe Queen revealed the facts that in 2.00 he said that. I don't know. He said that he used a different, like, fluctuation in his voice in this. What the fuck? I was so excited to find that out in first time.
No,
Like,
I
don't
just
really care.
well, the other thing is, I know that we're talking to other people who may, like, want to not spoil the commentaries, which I don't know. That for me, that doesn't really, commentaries are different from the story. Anyway, my point is, I was going to just reference the fact that in the past, in early commentary, Harlan did say that you cannot break, reverse, or fuck with a trope until you've established that you understand the trope and you respect it. Like, the whole reason that you're able to subvert a trope is because you have already proven to your audience that you know them, you respect them, you understand them. And I think it does not work to say, oh, well, Harlan doesn't use tropes in the traditional way, so you never know. He's going to subvert them. He does the opposite of all tropes. Well, he doesn't, because if he did, we would know the pattern already. And if, on the same vein, if he stuck only to tropes and how they functioned, we would get the pattern already, right? So the whole point is that he has to vary it. He has to decide what are tropes he's going to stick to and play by the book, and what are tropes he's going to pull a reverse on. How is he going to change this one? And that's the whole, like, balance of the story is, how can he fuck with your expectations? Because on one hand, you're like, oh, great, this is a straight up and down murder mystery, right? Like, Arthur got in, met the suspects, people died, he solved the mystery. On the other hand, you could say, oh my God, like, he got in, all the suspect died, and, like, we didn't get to solve the mystery. Like, what's going to happen now? And so it could really go anyway. And so when people try to bring up, like, well, you can't count on Harlan following the trope. No, you can't, but you also can't count on him subverting it either. So it's very hard to just lean on ideas of what you already know, and you have to really pick and choose what contextual knowledge is going to apply, which is, I think, something that makes Malevolent really unique. And the last thing I want to yap about is the fact that I said earlier in the show, and I heard somebody say something specific, and I want to address it because I don't want to cause waves. I'm very anxious about making waves.
I'm fine.
I know Peppers is less caution than I do.
I still have issue with the French people, like just putting it out there.
I will just say, when I was talking about the fact that Harlan is going to decide how things go based on how we respond, I don't mean that Harlan's going to change his story because we like a character or we don't like a character. That's not what I meant. I meant that, like, it's an active listening game that we're both playing together, and if you don't think that we have influence over the way that he's telling the story and like what he's doing at this moment, I think that is a disservice to how much he pays attention and how much he has watched his audience, and the fact that, like, yeah, it's his story, but if he really was just going to do whatever he wanted anyway, we wouldn't vote. This wouldn't be a back and forth. But this is a dialogue. Like, he does see fan art. He sees people talking about his characters. He goes to live streams and watches people draw his characters on occasion. Like, he knows what's going on, and he knows that his patrons especially are interacting and talking in the comments of his polls and things. And I just think, as much as that doesn't change his story and like the message he wants to send and what's going to happen like on the big scope, I do think it impacts something like, maybe, you know, for example, he explained to us, like, in the season 4 interview that he did, we had a choice about who we took into that final big crazy battle, and we had a choice as to whether or not we were going to take the Butcher to go confront Larson, and that whole thing would have changed if we had voted differently, or that whole thing would have changed if we had felt differently. I just feel like, yes, he has a point. Like, let's just pretend Harlan's ultimate plan is to kill Friar Horberg first. He just knows that before Arthur and John leave this castle, Horberg has to die for some plot point in the future in season 6. It's important that that still happens. That's going to happen no matter what. We don't know that, of course, but that will happen no matter what. But when he dies, how he dies, most of that could be really flexible depending on how we respond and if it's going to hit right and how Arthur has spoken to other people. So I think there's a lot more influx than people realize. I also just don't want people to think that, like, I'm trying to say Harlan is changing things for us just because we want him to. I don't think that at all. But that's my piece.
Yeah. I mean, I'll agree, especially like as a DM, for example, if I'm seeing that these characters are loving, you know, this such and such NPC, and I initially, before the game started, had them due to die within, 3 minutes after them meeting, and I'm seeing that these people really like them, well, I'm going to maybe have them stick around for a little bit longer so that I can make the death of this NPC so much more impactful.
Right.
So I'm assuming that's kind of relatively where you're coming from, Queen, where I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it's the DM perspective.
Fish says, why was I so sure you were going to say, well, I'm going to kill them immediately? Listen, I may be an angst lord, but in order to properly portray angst, you have to have your audience fall in love with these characters and watch them grow right in the midst of their growing pains, where you're really rooting for them. That's where you kill them.
You have to age it like cheese, Fish says.
Cheese was really not where I was going for, but listen, I like cheese, but I'm not gonna... Let's just move on.
I think we're done. I think we can get wrapped up. Thank you, Peppers, for coming. I appreciate you, and thank you for hanging out with me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, as always.
Of course.
So glad to be a guest.
Yeah, you're a guest in my house, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you to everyone joining us live, like Volcontrol, like Mizra, like Gami, like Roses of Envy, Rotten Little Flea. Thank you to Fish, of course, as well, and Graham. Thank you to our volunteer transcription team and our volunteer editing team, and thanks to everyone listening in the future. You can find Malevolent Autopsy on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. That's linktr.ee/Malevolent Autopsy for all the handiest links. And as always, the horrors persist.
And so do we.
I love you so much, but so do we.
Whatever, man!
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.